The alarm echoed through the zoo like a cry of despair. My heart raced when I saw the enclosure door open, swaying in the wind. Empty. Completely empty. I've worked here for 15 years and I've never seen anything like it. Boris, our 300-kilogram brown bear, had disappeared. The siren cut through the air. Visitors ran in panic, knocking over popcorn carts, dragging children by their arms. Screams echoed from every direction. A father stumbled while carrying his daughter. A woman dropped her purse and didn't even look back. Chaos took over everything in seconds. I grabbed my radio with trembling hands. The head of security's voice crackled through the device, tense and urgent. Police were called. Helicopters hovered over the area. Everyone was looking for Boris, but no one knew where he had gone. An adult bear loose in the city. The possibilities were terrifying. Then I saw something that froze my blood. Through the security cameras, Boris was running through the nearby streets. But he wasn't attacking anyone. He wasn't destroying anything. He was running with purpose, as if he knew exactly where to go. His eyes held a determination I had never seen in a wild animal. What the hell was going on? We followed Boris through the city cameras. He crossed 2 avenues, ignored a group of terrified people, and entered a small municipal park. There, he found an elderly man sitting on a wooden bench. Everyone else had fled. The park was empty. Except for that old man with white hair and a hunched back. My blood froze. I grabbed my phone to call for backup, but what I saw next left me paralyzed. Boris didn't attack. He approached slowly, lowered his massive head, and lay down at the old man's feet. The man extended his trembling hand and stroked the bear's fur. Tears streamed down his wrinkled face. At that moment, I realized that something much bigger was happening there. Something no security protocol could explain. A story that needed to be told. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Leave a comment telling us what you thought and which city or country you're watching from. I ran to the park with the security team. My chest burned, my legs felt heavy. When we arrived, we formed a silent perimeter around the bench. Tranquilizer guns aimed. Everyone expecting the worst. But the elderly man raised his hand, asking for calm. His name was Thomas. He was 83 years old, wearing simple clothes and carrying a tired gaze filled with decades of stories. His voice was weak but steady as he said that he knew Boris. That there was no danger at all. No one believed it. How could an old man know a wild bear? Thomas began to speak. 20 years earlier, he worked as a park ranger in a natural reserve. During a routine patrol, he found a dead female bear, a victim of illegal hunters. Beside the body, a cub cried desperately, trying to wake the mother who would never wake again. The cub had an injured paw, bleeding badly. Thomas couldn't leave him to die. He took the cub home, hidden from the authorities. He fed him with a bottle, cleaned his wounds, stayed up nights caring for him. He gave him the name Boris. For 6 months, that bear was his only companion. Thomas was a widower, lived alone, and Boris filled a void he didn't even know existed. But Boris's paw never healed properly. He limped and wouldn't be able to survive alone in the wild. Thomas had to make the most painful decision of his life. He handed Boris over to our zoo, where he would receive veterinary care and a safe life. He cried for days. He never returned to the zoo. He couldn't bear to see Boris caged. Until today. Thomas had returned for the first time in 2 decades. Just to see from a distance. Just to know if Boris was okay. But he didn't expect Boris to recognize him. Not after so much time. I looked at the bear lying at the old man's feet. Boris purred softly, like a giant cat. His right paw still limped slightly. Tears streamed down Thomas's face as he stroked that enormous head. How could an animal remember someone after 20 years? The zoo director arrived an hour later. I expected her to order Boris's immediate removal. Protocols, regulations, civil liability. But something changed when she saw the scene. Thomas was still stroking Boris. The bear hadn't moved an inch. She authorized something unprecedented. Thomas would be allowed to visit Boris daily at the zoo. 1 hour a day, always under supervision. We remodeled part of the enclosure, creating a special visitation area. No one besides Thomas would have access. It was risky, irregular, But that connection was undeniable. The visits began the following week. Every day at 3 in the afternoon, Thomas arrived by bus. He walked slowly to the special enclosure. Boris always waited in the same spot, by the fence. When he saw Thomas, his eyes shone in a way I had never seen in any animal. Thomas brought apples, honey, sometimes he just sat and spoke softly. He told stories of when Boris was small. He laughed remembering the mischief, how Boris stole food from the refrigerator, how he slept curled up at his feet. Boris listened to everything, his head resting on the old man's legs. I began to watch them every day. It was my job to ensure safety, but it became something more. I saw Thomas grow younger during those visits. His eyes came back to life. He smiled more, walked more upright. That bear was healing something deep inside him. The months passed. Spring, summer, autumn. The visits never failed. Even when it rained, even when Thomas coughed more than usual. He was always there. Boris too. That routine became sacred to both of them. But I noticed changes in Thomas. He lost weight. His skin grew paler. His cough worsened. One day, he arrived using a cane. Another day, he needed to lean on me to walk to the enclosure. My heart tightened. I knew what was coming. Thomas never complained. Never spoke about his health. He simply cherished every second with Boris. As if he knew time was running out. On his last visit, Thomas stayed longer than usual. He hugged the fence, rested his forehead against Boris's head. He whispered something I couldn't hear. Boris stayed still, just looking deep into his eyes. Thomas did not show up the next day, nor the one after that. My stomach twisted. I called the number he had left on the registration form. A female voice answered. It was his niece. The words came slowly, heavy with pain. Thomas had passed away during the night. He left in his sleep, in peace. I hung up the phone and looked at Boris. He was in his usual spot, waiting. He stared at the entrance gate, at the path Thomas always took. He waited the entire afternoon. When the sun set, Boris let out a sound I will never forget. A deep, heavy lament that echoed throughout the entire zoo. In the days that followed, Boris stopped eating. He lay in the same place, staring at the empty gate. Veterinarians tried everything. Nothing worked. He wasn't sick. He was grieving. A giant bear, mourning the loss of his best friend. Thomas's niece appeared 2 weeks later. She carried an old cardboard box, tied with twine. Inside were letters, faded photographs, and documents. Thomas had left specific instructions in his will. He wanted me to know everything. I opened the first letter. My hands were shaking. Thomas explained that Boris was not just an animal he had saved. Boris had saved him too. After his wife died, Thomas lost the will to live. He thought about giving up many times. But finding that injured cub gave him purpose again. Caring for Boris kept him alive. There were old photographs. A young Thomas, smiling, holding a bear cub in his arms. A small Boris drinking from a bottle. Another photo showed Boris sleeping at the foot of Thomas's bed. They were family. True family. The most shocking part came at the end of the will. Thomas left all his savings to the zoo. 50,000 in a savings account that no one knew existed. The money was to be used exclusively to improve the living conditions of Boris and the other animals. Renovations to enclosures. Veterinary treatment. Environmental enrichment. I cried while reading it. A simple man who lived modestly his entire life saved every cent thinking about the animals he loved. We used every cent exactly as Thomas had requested. We completely renovated Boris's enclosure. New trees, an artificial lake, natural caves for resting. We hired more veterinarians. We improved the diet of all the animals. The entire zoo was transformed. We placed a bronze plaque at the entrance of Boris's enclosure. It simply read, "In memory of Thomas, who taught us that love knows no barriers." Visitors stopped to read it. Some took photos. Others stood in silence, thoughtful. Boris returned to eating after a month. Slowly, but he did. He was never the same bear as before. He became quieter, more reflective. But he began to interact with the caretakers in a different way. Gentler. As if Thomas had left something within him. An invisible mark of kindness. I discovered something incredible months later. Thomas's niece brought more documents. Thomas had created a permanent fund. The interest from the invested money would guarantee continuous improvements to the zoo forever. He planned everything in the final months of his life. He knew he was dying and wanted to leave a legacy. Today, 5 years later, Boris is still alive and healthy. He is 13 years old now. Every afternoon, at 3 o'clock, he goes to the same spot where he used to meet Thomas. He stays there for an hour, just watching. Some visitors find it sad. I find it beautiful. It is memory. It is gratitude. It is love that crosses species and even death. The story of Thomas and Boris spread. Newspapers published articles. A documentary was made. Thousands of people visit the zoo just to see Boris. To understand that animals feel, remember, and love in deep ways that many humans have forgotten. I learned something working here all these years. True love doesn't need words. It doesn't need the same species. It doesn't need logic. It only needs a heart. Thomas and Boris proved that. Every time I see Boris lying in that special place, I remember the old man with the hunched back stroking a giant bear. And I understand that I witnessed something rare. A silent miracle. Proof that real connections survive everything. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what you felt. Thank you for being here.